Hi there, Debbie Nigro, Chief Executive Girlfriend, FirstWivesWorld.com. Say hello to my guest. We're going to talk about divvying up the marital property. Yes, a house is not a home and all that great stuff. Janell Weinstein, real estate and family law attorney. Welcome.
Thank you, Debbie. Nice
Good
to
to
be
have
here. Thanks so much.
You're looking fabulous. It's amazing that girls like you are this good looking and this smart. I love that.
Don't
about
give
you.
it up. Don't give up the
Don't,
secret.
Nothing. All right, so selling the marital house. This is one of the biggest decisions. You know, you've been living together. This is your home. It's his home, kid's home.
Right.
What happens in the split of a marriage is traumatic to somebody, to everybody. Do you have some initial thoughts on that when it first happens?
I have to tell you, Debbie, I hear time and time again people come into my office and their main focus is, I got to keep the home. I have to keep the home. And we understand as lawyers that's an emotional thing, but we got to bring it down and get the emotion out of it. So it's really important to consider when you're thinking about the marital home is what you're really trying to do at the end of the day. And what I mean by that is that, do I want to sell? Do I want to keep? And what does that mean? If I decide to sell, what is that going to mean to me? And if I decide to keep the house, what do I have to do that?
It's always been said, I've heard it said, to tell the woman, never leave the home. Never leave the home. Do you give the same advice?
That's a different issue, Debbie. It's a question of whether I should leave the home before you get a divorce.
Right.
And I tell either client, male or female, you should not leave the home. And that's for a different reason, not dividing the assets. You don't lose your house because you've moved out.
Important point.
That's very important. You're still on title. If you and I owned a house together, I still have title to the house. If a husband and wife own a house together and you're not on title, you still can't sell that house from underneath somebody because you're married. So the important thing when you hear, and that's a big misconception, don't move out, don't move out. It's for different reasons. You don't want to move out because once you move out, they could change the locks under some jurisdictions, and you don't have the freedom of coming back and forth. Most importantly, you aren't aware of what's going on in your own home. They could be damaging the home. If you're looking to sell the home, you don't know if the mortgage is being paid. You've got to watch everything. So it's very important that you could stay in the house for that reason.
The kids are always the biggest concern, especially when you're going to talk about where they live. What kind of advice do you find yourself giving over and over when people come to you and say, what do we do here?
Well, that's the thing. The kids are the big consideration. What are we going to do with the children? And people feel that no matter what, I have to keep my children in this house.
Right.
I have to stay in the school. Well, that's not a reality. If you have a child that is maybe a senior in high school, a junior in high school, courts may tend to think, let them finish out their school year. But the biggest misconception is, the courts do not believe if you're 5 years old and you're starting school or 10 years old that you need to stay in that home.
Really?
So it's very important to consider. What's even more important to consider is the fact that you may not want the home at the end of the day. There's a lot of practical and financial considerations you have to focus on.
Okay.
And the first one that's very important is if you're going to buy out your spouse, you have to be able to buy them out. You have to be able to come up with the money, which means you're going to have to get a mortgage. If you already have a mortgage on your house, you're going to have to get a mortgage with a bigger amount of money because you're going to refinance that mortgage and you're going to pay off your spouse. So at the end of the day, even if you can afford to do that, you may have no money left over
To pay the rent, the mortgage.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
to pay
what
the
kind of
bills.
life are you creating for your family?
How do you help somebody figure that out? Is there a formula?
Yeah, well, you have to look at all the assets. You have to figure out maybe there's a different way we can go. Maybe you're fortunate enough to have a lot of assets. So you can offset, I'll keep the house, and I'll offset another asset of equal value. And that'll be okay because now I don't have to buy you out. And I can qualify for a mortgage. I find that many families' support systems come into play.
Do you find that when you look at the mortgage and whose name is on the mortgage, it's both parties often? Or
It
most
could
of
be
the time?
both parties, it could be one party, but the fact of the matter is if you're buying your spouse out, they're going to want their name off the mortgage. Now, there's an interesting fact that people always bring up to me, and they say, well, what about me staying on title with my husband after we get divorced, or wife? Is that a good idea? Or they say, I want to do that. And I say, not a good idea. And you say, why? We can all stay in the house. We can preserve what's going on. This is your problem. You have to know the finances of your spouse. It's like you and I holding title to a property. You may move on. You get remarried. You are fiscally irresponsible. You get a lot of debt. So now our asset we're holding together, our husband and ex-husband and wife, they're holding an asset together. You have to worry about their debt and the liens against the house. So it's really important. You may not want to hold title with somebody that's a bad business partner. And the likelihood is if they're a bad spouse, they're a bad business partner too.
This is some heavy information. There's more information about divvying up the marital assets at firstwivesworld.com with Janell Weinstein, our expert on this topic. Seems like you know everything. More to come.